Wait, so you drive a taxi, right?
Well, it's an excellent way of learning about all different kinds of people. And what's your vocation?
My vocation? I've done lots of different jobs.
I always thought you'd end up a writer like your old man.
Actually, I do write. You know, sometimes I try.
Well, there's no such thing as trying to write. One writes or one doesn't. And you have to take every opportunity to practice your craft. Anyway, I know you've inherited some writing talent from me because I am a truly great writer.
All right, everybody, you have just seen a scene from Being Flynn, starring Mr. Paul Dano, who is here. So, Paul, welcome. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Now, Being Flynn came from a memoir with a great title, which I can say here. I always like to say that. I can say,
good, yeah.
You know, another night in Suck City, and then ABC Standards and Practices always says, no, you can't. No, you can't. But I'm saying that.
Yeah, good.
And so you probably, meeting with your co-star Robert De Niro and your director probably said, no, don't like that. We're calling this Being Flynn.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened from day one. First page, Paul Weitz wrote of the script. He said, I'm retitling this Being Flynn. You know, truth be told, supposedly, you know, this is the flaw maybe in the whole test screening world, but apparently that had an impact on us changing the title. I don't hate it, but I do hope that people know that it's based on that book, because it did quite well, and it's actually a pretty stunning memoir, and the people who like it, you know, really like it. So I hope they know somehow. So Being Flynn, you're Flynn, Robert De Niro's Flynn. Can you just set this up for everybody out there that hasn't been to the movie yet? Yeah, it's about a young man who's in a tough spot in life, and he starts to work at a homeless shelter just to do something good for himself and for other people. And while he's working there, he ends up meeting his father, who comes in homeless, who he hasn't seen in over 20 years. And he is a lunatic, homeless aspiring writer, and Nick is also an aspiring writer, and it's about their relationship. It is not a tale where they become best friends, you know, it's a relationship of conflict. You know, it's two nice parts. I think Bob is amazing in the film, and I like my part, and you know, I think it's all right.
That was my first wife, Jody.
I know who it is. She was my mother.
I know she was your mother. She was the most beautiful woman in the world. She was the love of my life. She was the light of my love. I know if she was still alive today, we'd be together. Such a tragic accident.
What accident?
What accident? The accident that cut her life short.
Wasn't an accident. She left a note.
What happens when you have the writer there?
It was actually...
You're playing this guy.
Yeah, the first couple weeks of preparation for the part were really hard, you know, until you get to a place where you just say, I'm going to trust myself and take what I can from all these people. So I hung out with the real Nick Flynn, then you have the memoir, then you have the script which Paul Weitz wrote, and so he puts a piece of himself into that when you adapt something. And then there's me, so sort of wrangling all my resources and knowing that the script is your Bible, because that's what's going on screen. I think sometimes if you get hung up on things that are in the book but are not in the film, that can actually be dicey. I think you have to understand why something is not in there and go with the script. Ultimately, it was a wonderful thing to have so many resources, especially because it's such a personal story. You know, Nick was a great help. He was there every day on set. We had a great time. Definitely, when you're playing somebody and they're there on set, you do have a moment where you feel a responsibility. And I think you have to pretty quickly exercise that demon and just say, you know, I know what I'm going to do with this guy, and it's going to be a little different than him, but I think he'll be okay with it, and he was.
What kind of research did you and Robert De Niro do in terms of this homeless shelter thing? Did you hang out there?
Yeah, I went and volunteered at a shelter here in Manhattan, down in the Bowery, and then worked there, and then also went out on a truck with them, and we'd go to like Tompkins Square Park, for example, and set up a table. And it was the winter, so we'd give out food, but also hats and gloves and scarves and socks. And it was a moving experience as a person, and it was important for the film. Probably the thing that I learned the most was how many sort of ordinary people were there. I think, you know, there are people with mental illness or with addiction, but there was actually a surprising amount of people who had maybe been homeless like 3 weeks, you know, who had just lost their apartment because of job or loan or whatever. So growing up in New York, at a certain point, you know, your interaction with the homeless becomes every day. And not that you don't think about them, but, you know, it's part of your world. So this was very eye-opening, how many people I could relate to and talk to. It's totally normal. So that was an interesting world to get to know. And also there's an addiction aspect to the film, so exploring that a little bit, because it's easy to stereotype addiction. And again, for me with that, it's you know, people you go to work with every day who go home at night and actually take part in this behavior that you may not know about. Not everybody is in an abandoned warehouse, you know, shaking. You know, I mean, I'm sure there is that, but so it was interesting to approach that from, you know, hopefully an emotional standpoint, why Nick Flynn would need something, what he's covering up, what he's pushing down, what he's suppressing. Bob and I meet in the film, our characters, so we didn't go do stuff together, and we didn't really rehearse. I guess we just both were well prepared and let it fly in front of the camera.